our next speaker, Colin Tepfer. Colin, I am going to go over here and make you a co-host here.
Perfect.
So you can share your screen if you'd like. Colin is one of our longtime coaches. He started back when he was unemployed and has continued to serve us and job seekers in his employment. And he is the founder and principal of the Training Guys, a learning and development consulting firm, providing a full suite of training, strategy, design, development, and delivery of services across multiple industries for more than 20 years. He's an award-winning facilitator, and he's worked with a broad range of companies from Disney and HP to Microsoft, Pacific Life, and Salesforce. Again, he's a JSN coach, and he's also the senior program manager of Salesforce Layoffs Support Network. So he got laid off from Salesforce and created a network and a training, a way to train job seekers in their job search. So Colin, it's great to have you join us this morning, and I'm going to turn it over to you to help us along in this next step.
Well, that's perfect, Craig. Thank you very much. That introduction is crazy. That's a lot to live up to. So I just want to say thank you for that. I have shared my screen. Hopefully you're all seeing it. It should say improving your online job search results with JobScan. You're seeing that? All right,
we're seeing that.
Trying to maximize my other window here so I can see you, but I think I'm going to turn my video off because I remember this particular setup doesn't like Zoom. So if you'll bear with me a moment while I do that, so that I don't put it out on you. Let's go over here and turn off my video. There, that might make it better. Everybody good? You can hear me?
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, Craig, I want to thank you for having me in. What a fantastic looking group you've got today. I think we have about 25, 26 people. That's fantastic. As we often say, and I say this in the Slack community that Craig was mentioning a moment ago, we're sorry that you have the need to be here, but thank God that you found us. This is an amazing group, folks. If you've been here before, you know that. You know the devotion and the energy that Craig and Becky pour into this amazing, amazing group. And it's the reason that I have been a part of it now. Craig, can you believe it? It's been about 10 years I've been associated with you guys. This is really, really amazing. So again, I just want to say thank you for doing this. As Craig said, I was laid off January 4th. With the Salesforce layoff. We call ourselves the 10% Club. Salesforce announced that they were going to lay off 10% of their workforce, and at that time we were numbered at just over 80,000 people. So that meant about 8,000 people were going to get the axe. I received an unexpected email at about 5 o'clock in the morning that said two things. Hey, thank you for the great job you've been doing for the last 3 years. We just want to let you know that your position has been eliminated. And I thought, what a great way to communicate a layoff, anonymously, via email, and immediately all of our network access was cut off. I've already run out of words for this week. Look at this. It was difficult that morning, but as I've come to learn over the last 3.5 months, with 3 more rounds of layoffs happening at Salesforce, I'm so very glad that I was a part of the first round, because it was unexpected. It came in the night. It happened. It was behind us. And the group that was laid off in January began to move forward to set up ways to support one another and to lift each other up and do what you're doing here, really help each other through an unexpected job transition. The second, third, and fourth rounds of layoffs, those folks were here, were still with Salesforce for up to 3 more months. And you can imagine what happened to the culture, not knowing if they were going to be next, not knowing if there were going to be more layoffs, the anxiety, the stress, the loss of some incredible talent. Some people lost key members of their teams. And that anxiety, I can't imagine still being at Salesforce and dealing with all of that. So very thankful that shortly after we got our notification that we spun up this community, this Slack community called Salesforce Layoffs, as Craig said. We brought in, now we have over 5,000 members in our community that we manage. We do training, we do free workshops, we have coaching, one-on-one and group coaching. We have hiring managers and recruiters actually in our network that are directly connecting with job seekers. It's been an amazing thing to be a part of. And I tell you this story, not because this is what I was asked to come in here for. Sorry, Craig, bear with me for just a moment. I'll get right into our job scan session.
You're fine.
The thing I want to say, folks, is I have been laid off 4 times in my career, 4 times in the last 12 years, actually. And I'm getting really good at this. And if I may, this is not something you want to get really good at, honestly. Who wants to get really good at being laid off? The one thing about it, though, is it builds resiliency. The first time I was laid off, I was panicked. I didn't know what to do. I lost my network. I lost my team. I lost my community. I lost my calendar. Like, what do I do with my day? My day was no longer filled up all day with meetings and calls. The second time I was laid off, I was convinced it was me both times. I was the reason I was laid off. The third time it happened, I began to realize and see a pattern here. And this fourth time, I really learned deeply that these layoffs had nothing to do with me. They weren't personal. In fact, this last time I know exactly what happened, and it was the same all 4 times. It was an OpEx exercise. The company needed to meet a certain margin that they reported to the street, and they just drew a line and cut a number of folks. And it was very difficult, right? And I imagine some of you were in that same boat. You've been laid off, you lost your job for reasons that had nothing to do with yourself or your own performance. And to that, I want to share my first message here with you. I'm going to slip back over to my PowerPoint deck. And I'm going to start this morning's presentation with a little rebus. That's a picture message. On your screen, you should see 3 weird looking pictures and a couple of letters. This is my message for all of you as we get started here this morning with this session. And if you figured it out, great. If you haven't, I'm going to put some clues underneath each one of those little things there to phonetically sound it out. And if you're still having problems with it, let me just put it bluntly on the screen. You are amazing. I want that to sink in, folks. When we lose our jobs for whatever reason, as Craig said earlier, we take a huge hit to our self-esteem, to our confidence, to our ability to keep moving forward. I want to tell you all, you are amazing. And I know that because you're here. You're at Job Seekers. You're trying, you're working, you're networking, you're doing all of the right things. And let me tell you, you're with one of the best organizations in Austin that you can be with, and that is the Job Seekers Network. So if you're feeling a little in doubt about your own self-esteem, about your worth, about being isolated at home by sending out hundreds of resumes and applying for hundreds of jobs and not getting any real responses, let me just remind you again here, folks, you are amazing. Carry that with you through this week, please, because that is really heartfelt and it's true. Now, let me jump into the agenda, what I'm going to talk about for the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to cover off a topic called JobScan. Now, I'm sure some of you are familiar with JobScan. Some of you may even use JobScan. I'm going to talk about the importance of JobScan and other tools similar to JobScan like Teal and others. We're going to talk about why they're important. I'll start with a quick little introduction by the numbers about me, different than the introduction I just gave you. We'll talk about job search approaches. What is an ATS and why should you care? How can you improve your odds against these ATS systems? What is JobScan and how can it help me? We'll talk about a couple of new tools that JobScan has just released, or at least one that they've just released and one that's really powerful that I think you should know about. That's the Bounce Back Toolkit and the Job Tracker. And then I'll open it up to Q&A at the end here for anything that you want to talk to me about, whether it's related to JobScan, resumes, or anything related to your job search. Does that sound okay with everybody? Good. Well, let's dive right in then. So let's start with an introduction about me, but this is going to be a little different. This is me by the numbers. I'm going to put some numbers up on the screen and hopefully they're going to mean something to you. 16 was the age at which I first got my very first W-2 job. 39, I hate to say this, I need to change this slide. 40 years is the number of years I have worked in industry. Craig, that really is a painful number for me. I just got to tell you right there. 25 is the number of employers I've worked for. 36 is the number of titles I've held. 200 plus is the number of employees I've managed over all that time. I've started 3 solopreneur or entrepreneur companies in that time. I've been laid off, as I said earlier, 4 times. And 4 of my favorite companies I've worked for, as Craig mentioned in my introduction, are Salesforce, Disney, HP, and Pacific Life. Now that's a kind of impressive set of numbers, but let me show you a more impactful set of numbers on the right side. These are my job search history numbers. In my career, I've applied for over 2,000 jobs. I've submitted over 2,000 applications. I've had thousands of rejections. I have interviewed more than 300 times as an applicant. I've had over 300 interviews as a hiring manager. By the way, that's 300 interviews, second round interviews or more, right? 300 plus times I've interviewed as a hiring manager, 100 plus times. Oh, as I said, I've been interviewed. I need to read my slide. Second round interviews, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes written and customized. Now, again, that's a lot of numbers. Let me call out 3 of them just to kind of highlight why we're talking today. 2,000 plus applications submitted, over 100 times I've been in second round interviews. That ratio right there is terrible, right? If I've submitted more than 2,000 resumes, you would expect that I would have had more than 100 or 100 plus second round interviews. And all of that has only netted me 36 different job titles in my entire career. That's a terrible set of ratios here, folks. That's a terrible set of numbers. And what I'm here to do is help you decrease this ratio for you. If you're submitting application after application, sending in resumes, and you're not getting responses, the good news is I'm here to help you today. I'm going to help you make your numbers look much better than mine do, or mine have. And we're going to talk about how to do that right now. There are 3 different ways people typically find a job. They apply online, they work with a recruiter, or they get a referral. Oh, and by the way, I meant to say this earlier. If you have any questions as I get going here, please don't hesitate to jump in. You can put it in the chat, or you can just come off mic and ask the question as I go along. I have a lot of information to cover, and I'll just keep plowing through. So if you have questions, go ahead and jump in. Back to our presentation. Apply online, work with a recruiter, or get a referral. If you apply online, there's some pros and cons, obviously. It's easy and low risk. You can submit as many job applications as you want per week, and it feels good, right? It feels productive. Like, I submitted 40 applications this week or today, and I feel like I did something. The downside is you have a high degree of competition when you do that, because a lot of people are applying for those same jobs online. You get a very low response rate, as most of you are figuring out, and that's really tough when you're already feeling defeated to do all this work and not even get responses to those resumes and applications you're submitting. And one of the big reasons for that, of course, is the reason we're here to talk today. And that's because your resumes are being filtered out by these ATS systems, automated tracking systems, which we'll get into in just a moment. A better way to find a job potentially is to work with a recruiter. But again, there are pros and cons here as well. When you work with a recruiter, oftentimes the recruiter finds you, or maybe you have a recruiter in your network that you can work with. And it feels good also because it feels like you have a sponsor, somebody who's got a stake in your job search, like they're in it with you. You want to make sure that you're not working with a paid recruiter, though. If you're paying somebody to help you find a job, quite often that's a scam. That's a very difficult situation. And unless you are working as an executive with an executive placement agency that guarantees placement for a fee, I would steer clear of any recruiting firm that wants you to pay for their services up front. Even with working with a recruiter, you're still going to have a medium degree of competition because the recruiters are handling multiple applicants, and there are multiple recruiters working oftentimes on the same role. So while it seems like you have that sponsor helping you, there's still going to be a lot of competition. Another thing to know about recruiters, of course, is they're not all created equal. You want to make sure that you're working with recruiters who are direct hire, who are at the company, who are hiring for the roles that they've posted, and kind of steer clear of the third-party recruiters who are doing it just for a fee. Oftentimes those are, low-level recruiters who are grabbing the low-hanging fruit and just trying to swing in and get a fee for a placement. So you want to make sure you're working with the company recruiters rather than third parties, if at all possible. And then even if you're working with a recruiter, know that they're still filtering your resume out using the ATS system. And again, we'll talk about how to beat those in just a moment. The best way, without a doubt, on landing a job is to get a referral. And we all probably all gotten referrals before, sometimes with good results, sometimes maybe not so good results, but this requires a network connection, right? This is a person who serves as your internal champion. And of course, the great thing about a referral is they typically, most big companies anyway, they pay a referral fee. So if you're able to connect with somebody at the company, talk with them, and they're willing to submit your name and share your resume with the hiring manager or the recruiter, they're doing so not just altruistically sometimes, but also because they're going to get a referral fee. And that's great because they're invested in your success as well. Referrals, of course, are harder to get, but they produce the best odds by far. And the reason for that is because they're able to get past the ATS systems and get your resume directly to the hiring manager or the recruiter who's posting that job. Now, there's still some cons with referrals, and that can include things like limited availability and willingness. You may have a connection at that company, but oftentimes, they're busy. Like they may not have time to spend creating or filling out the referral. Some processes for creating referrals internally are pretty cumbersome for those folks, and they do it purposely for that, for the reason to make sure that they're not just submitting referrals willy-nilly. And then also their willingness. Maybe you have a connection there, but they may not be willing to refer you, or maybe you don't have a great connection with that person. And it also depends on the relationship. As I said, your relationship with that referral, as well as the referral's relationship with the hiring manager or the recruiter. So keep all of those things in mind. As far as ROI, you can see at the bottom of the screen, Apply Online has the lowest ROI, Referral has the best ROI. But in this session today, as much as it pains me, we're going to spend our focus way over on the left-hand side, where typically you receive the lowest return on your investment of time. But I'm going to talk to you about ways to increase that investment of time. And the reason we're going to focus on this is because I have been, in fact, I am where you are today. And I know that no matter what I tell you, you're going to spend a lot of your time online looking at jobs, finding jobs you want, and applying for those jobs online. So if you're going to do it, you might as well be equipped with the best knowledge and information on how to make that time productive. And that's what I'm going to spend the rest of our presentation talking about today. Any questions here so far? You guys are certainly an attentive group, and I don't think I've told you anything that you don't know yet, but the way that we're presenting it and the way I'm going to tie this together, hopefully is going to be very beneficial for you. What's an ATS and why should I care? So an ATS is a system, an applicant tracking system. It is a piece of code. It's an algorithm. It's a system that companies use in order to help filter down all of the applications they get. When they were first introduced, they were a great thing for recruiters and hiring managers, because if you've ever been a hiring manager and you posted a job, in a very short period of time, you can get hundreds or even thousands of resumes for the same job. Well, ATS systems were created to help hiring managers and recruiters identify the key criteria for the job and for the candidates they're looking for, and then just surface up those candidates to them. The flip side of that, of course, means that it filters out every other resume that doesn't match that unique set of criteria. And you can see that about 90% of companies, actually probably more than that today, this was an older statistic, I would say almost every large company today uses an applicant tracking system to help find qualified candidates. And the more important thing, again, is they use it to filter out the unqualified candidates. Our goal here today is to determine how we can best make our resumes bypass the ATS systems and skip being filtered out by those systems altogether. There are several tools, as I mentioned at the top, that you can use. One of the preferred, one of the oldest, and one of the best tools still in the market today is JobScan. If you're using Teal or some of the other systems out there, they work in a similar manner, and all the concepts I'm going to talk about with regard to JobScan apply to those tools as well. But I've been using JobScan now for about 10 years. I've used it very successfully, and I've also coached many, many hundreds of people to modify their resumes to make them more attractive and get eyeballs on those resumes instead of just getting them filtered out through the ATSs. So I do highly recommend JobScan, as well as the other tools like Teal, for example. All right, so let's jump ahead and get right to the meat here. Once you register for JobScan, and we'll get into the registration and what that looks like in just a moment, but once you register for JobScan, how does it work? What does it really do? What's the purpose of this tool? Well, the purpose is to make your resume match as closely as possible to the job description so that you get a high score, a high matching score on these through these ATS scans, and you pass the scan and you get into the company, actually getting eyeballs from the recruiter or the hiring manager on your resume. That's the entire purpose of these tools. The way it works is very simple. On the left-hand side, you can see step one, it says paste or upload your resume. You simply copy and paste the text of your resume into that left box. Then you go to the job description that you're applying for and you do the same thing. You copy and paste the job description into the right-hand box over here. And then the magic really happens. This is where the JobScan tool does its job. It searches your resume for a variety of criteria, and we'll get into those criteria in just a moment. And it scores your resume as a match against that job description based on a variety of data points. And once I click this scan button, you'll see it'll go through the gyrations. It scores my resume. It gives this particular resume a 68% score in matching the job description that I posted here. You can see the categories that it scored my resume against on the right-hand side: ATS findings, recruiter findings, skills match, and format checks. It'll also do a cover letter scan if I decide I want to use my cover letter, but we're not going to get into that in this particular presentation. We're going to stick to just the resume scans today. You'll notice also that in the upper left-hand corner here, it says the ideal match rate is 80 or above. Today, if you're hitting 75, 80% or more, chances are very likely that you'll beat this ATS scan. You won't get filtered out, and you will have a much better chance of winding up in the review pile as opposed to the discard pile with your resume and application. Does that make sense? Cool. Let's talk about what these are and how this scan works and how you can use this tool to get a better match and a higher score with your resume. You'll notice again, I mentioned the different categories here. Under ATS findings, this is where the tool, by the way, the job scan tool knows all the different ATS systems that are out there. And if you're able to tell the job scan platform when you do the scan, which company you're applying for, it already knows which ATS is going to be used by that company. For example, Amazon would use Workday, as does Salesforce, right? So if you put in that you're applying for a job at Salesforce or Amazon, it's going to use the same criteria that Workday uses to compare your resume to the job description. If you're applying for another company, they may use Talio or any number of the HRIS systems, which are also the ATS systems. They may use any variety of those. And JobScan's been around long enough that it knows which ATS systems those companies use, and it scans using the same criteria. So we'll talk about what that looks like and how we can improve our ATS findings in just a moment. Recruiter findings are a little more subjective. And this one really kind of gets me sometimes. Just like algorithms have particular criteria they're looking for, they're programmed to look for. Believe it or not, recruiters have certain things they're looking for. And you just heard from the previous presenter talk about things that she liked and didn't like. And I'll say it's like this. When it comes to resumes and hiring managers and recruiters looking at things, what's the old axiom? Opinions are like, I like to put my elbow at this point, but you can't see me. And I would point to my elbow at this point. I say opinions are like elbows. Everybody has, and then I put my other elbow up and you see everybody has two, right? We all have opinions when it comes to resumes and applications. Well, recruiters do as well. There are certain things that they like and certain things that bug the snot out of them. ATS here, of the job scan tool, knows a lot of those. They work with a lot of hiring managers and recruiters across the industry to constantly tweak these things that recruiters like and don't like. And it scans your resume for those things too. Very subjective. It seems very, very weird, but they do that as well. You can see that my resume, there are two things that I did that it likes, that recruiters typically like, and two things that they don't like. And we'll dig into that in just a moment, show you what those look like. The meat of this scan, though, is really the skills match, right? Because this is where we're trying to determine, does your skill set match the skill set of the job description that the company is looking to hire for, right? So of course, you want to make sure that your skills are there. That's hard skills, soft skills, interpersonal skills, etc. And again, we'll dig into that in just a moment, see what that looks like. And then last but not least, we also talk about, and it scans for format checks, something you might not think about, but here's a little tip for you today. Think about your resume. If you use a header or footer, now maybe going back just a little bit for some of you, if you use a header or footer on your resume, or you use tables, or even in some cases, if you use columns on your resume, do you know that can be a criteria that can get your resume kicked out of an ATS? Because the ATS systems, they don't read headers and footers. In fact, they chop them off. They just don't understand them. So if you put your name and your contact information in the header section of your resume and you submit it through an ATS system, chances are your name and your email address could get chopped off. You may be the right candidate for that job. In fact, they may love everything about your resume, but your name and your email address and your contact information are missing. They don't know how to get a hold of you, so you go in the discard pile. So that's a very important tip to make sure that if you're putting your name and your contact information in the header, you move it out of the header and put it into the body of the resume. And I'll show you what that looks like when I bring up our resume example in just a moment. Cool? Again, tables, columns, all of those kind of things are confusing to ATS and will get you kicked out. So doing those format scans with JobScan, which it does automatically, is also very important because again, you want to do everything you can to get a high score and make these ATSs like your resume so they pass it on to the recruiter and the hiring manager. All right, let's look at what these things, these criteria, these scans look like and how do we improve our resume accordingly. When you're here on this report page, you'll simply scroll down and you'll go to each of the sections and you'll be able to read the details of what it found. Here we're in the first category, ATS findings, as you can see in the top left corner, and it has 4 different things that it scanned and gave me feedback on: skills and keywords, job title match, education match, and ATS tips. Now, Craig, remind me, I just came in at the end. Was it Jennifer who spoke before me?
It was Laurie.
Lori, thank you very much. I just caught the tail end of Lori's presentation, and one of the things I heard Lori say is don't change your job titles on your resume because hiring managers want it to match your LinkedIn profile. I totally agree with that. There is one place though that we're going to talk about where you can change the title, and that's the title of your resume, and we'll see that in just a moment. Well, before we get there, let's talk about skills and keywords. At the top here, you can see it tells me very distinctly I'm missing two important high-value skills on my resume. For example, the phrase customer experience appears in the job description 3 times, but it's not on the resume that I just submitted for scanning, right? In addition, there are 13 other hard and soft skills that I'm missing. If I click this link, it'll take me down and I can look at those skills, and I can add those skills to my resume, and we'll see exactly how to do that in just a moment. The next one, as I was just teeing up, was job title match. The title at the top of your resume, that is definitely something you can and should change. Now, this is some very particular advice for those folks staying in an industry. So if you're a senior software engineer, for example, or an accountant or a salesperson, you're probably going to stay somewhere in that sphere of influence, unless you're changing careers, which is a separate topic we'll talk about in a moment. But if you're staying in an industry, staying in a particular genre or vertical, you don't change the job titles for each of your job descriptions. Those are set. Those are what your job titles were. But the title of your resume is something you can absolutely change. And I highly recommend that you do change it, because that is also one of the things that the ATS systems look for. So if you are a senior systems engineer and they're looking for a systems analyst, you would be an incongruent match for that role. Maybe you're tired of being an engineer, you want to be an analyst, but you use your systems engineer role. That's one of the things that the job scan will look at, and it'll tell you, hey, these job titles don't match. You can go in there and change the title of your resume to match the title of that job description without changing any of your job description roles that you've had in the past. Does that make sense? I know you can't see me right now, so this eye contact thing is kind of hard. I apologize. But just with a nod of your head, those of you on, does that make sense what we're talking about changing the title? Again, I'll show that to you when I pull up the resume here in just a moment, show you where that title lives. The other two things here really quickly are education match. Do you have the right education match? That's pretty straightforward. We can talk ad nauseum about that. But as long as if they're looking for a particular education level, you have a matching education level, make sure that's on your resume. And then down at the bottom here, you can see some ATS tips. Again, I mentioned earlier, if you can tell JobScan which company you're applying for, like in this case, it says Amazon, they know which ATS they're using, and they'll use that same criteria to match the scan. And you'll get a much closer approximation of the way that your resume will scan through that ATS. I'm going to continue down here to recruiter findings. We've got word count, measurable results, job level match, and words to avoid. That one really gets me. Let's talk about word count. While this is important, it's not critical. If you have a very dense resume, meaning you've used a lot of words in a 2 or 3 page resume, believe it or not, that can count against you. This is one of those things, again, it's a subjective thing by recruiters. They like to see white space. They like to see organization. They know all the tricks of reducing your resume down to 8-point font, trying to get more words on the page, and reducing your margins and increasing the paragraph size and all the kind of things so that you can get more details on there. The problem is it makes it visually unappealing to a recruiter to see just a dense page of text. They skim it anyway. It's better to have white space. It's better to keep your word count down and be more concise and highlight those areas that you want them to catch as they're skimming. So word count is another one of those things that JobScan scans for. It's just I'll let you know, kind of an FYI thing. I wouldn't necessarily change your word count dramatically unless you were way over on the word count. If you were double what JobScan suggests, then you may want to consider revising. Measurable results, though, this one is definitely one that you want to include, and it has great impact. Measurable results means having numbers, actually numerals, on your resume next to these things that you are marking as your achievements. So for example, if you're in sales and you say increased sales year over year, well, that's great, but increased sales year over year by 15% or 30% or whatever, having a number there next to that achievement turns that into what we call a measurable result. And ideally, you want to have at least 5 measurable results throughout the body of your resume. If your resume is 3 pages long, ideally you want to have about 3 to 5 measurable results on each page, so that it goes through, not only are you talking about what you've done, but you actually have some results that can be measured and quantified. And again, that's something that helps increase your score, not only through JobScan, but through the ATSs. That's what they're looking for today, are measurable results. Job level match, of course, that's pretty straightforward. If you're an executive and you're applying for an entry level role or vice versa, those are things that'll get kicked out. So you want to be applying for a role that's in a similar range, maybe one or two up or one or two down. But if it's a completely different level on a role, that's something that you want to be aware of. And JobScan will let you know that as well. And then this is the one that always gets me right here, words to avoid. Now, if you haven't applied for a job in 10, 15 years, this is going to sound really irritating to you. But there are definitely words to avoid. Tired old cliches that we were all taught were things that you want to make sure you include. Like they've got one listed here, team player. I always thought team player was a good thing. Hey, he's a team player. No, they're really phrases that don't mean much anymore, right? Team player, how do you quantify that? That's a difficult thing to do. It's better to remove those cliches or those phrases that don't mean much and replace them with measurable results. So, managed large team, managed a team of 30 people, successfully. Those kinds of things, those are great ways to replace team player, for example. So just keep those in mind. And again, JobScan will point these out to you if you're using any of those phrases that could get kicked up as, what do they call them, as pet peeves for recruiters, all right? Again, a lot of information here. Any questions, just go ahead and shout them out, all right? I'm gonna just keep plowing on until I hear a question asked.
Yeah, I have a question.
Please go right ahead.
What if the job description is loaded with the cliches?
Scott, that's a great question. Isn't that gonna tell you something about who wrote that job description or who put that job description together more accurately? Likely, right? It doesn't mean that the recruiter doesn't still have those pet peeves. That job description may have been cut and pasted together from a lot of different job descriptions. If you're a hiring manager, you know how that can happen, right? So I would read that with a grain of salt. I would learn from that what that means, but I wouldn't necessarily try and comply unless JobScan says you're missing certain words and phrases that are important to the job description. Does that make sense?
Yes, my concern is that it would still fail on the ATS term match.
It might, but if the ATS is telling you that these are phrases that you should remove, then it's not going to score those phrases as critical or key. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yep.
No, it's a great point. It's absolutely a great point. And I love that. Thanks. And that's a great question. Here's where I was going to show you what it looks like to identify those hard skills, where they're missing in your resume, and how you would go and update them. So JobScan has a new feature called Power Editor now, which I've used. It uses a little AI and it does some automatic enhancements of your resume. I'm not sure that I'm in love with it yet, and I'm certainly not relying upon it yet myself, but we'll talk about it in just a moment. I'm going to do the manual process here first. I'll walk through that, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how Power Edit automates that process for you. So here I've gotten to the hard skills comparison, right? You can see the skills are listed down the left-hand side. This is based on JobScan's algorithm, the same ATS algorithm that's being used, right? And it searches for those words that are used and that have importance in that job description. It lists those down the left-hand side. It'll also list variations, if there are any, that it will accept in that second column. And then the third column lists how many times those keywords show up in your resume, and the fourth column, how many times they show up in the job description. And it gives you a comparison. Here you can see what we were talking about on the previous screen, where it shows customer experience. It's listed 3 times over on the right-hand column in the job description, but you can see I have an X there, meaning it's not listed in the resume itself, right? So to fix that, I simply click on the words customer experience. It will take me over to the editing screen. Now, here's the cool thing. All of those keywords are now represented horizontally across the top. I can scroll left and right, keep this screen up, and I can go along and look at each of those keywords as I scroll left or right, and I can adjust my resume accordingly. On the left-hand side, of course, is my resume. And on the right-hand side is the job description with the keyword highlighted. And the important point is it's highlighted here in context, because sometimes there might be a keyword like product, and it's important how it's used in the context. Are we talking about a product, or are we talking about product knowledge, for example, right? So you want to be able to see how those terms are used in context, and then go back to your resume and add those terms into your resume if they're missing. And I'm going to show you a very easy way to do this so that it makes it very easy for you to modify your resume without rewriting the whole thing. So stay with me for just a moment and we'll get there when I bring up the resume, because that becomes one of the most frustrating things. Like, wait a minute, Colin, are you saying we have to rewrite our resume for every single job we apply for? You're not going to like my answer. The answer is yes, you do need to customize your resume for every single job you apply for. Because if you have one generic resume and you apply for all the jobs that way, you're going to get a terrible match rate. But the good news is Uncle Colin is here to help you. That's why we're here today, is to be able to show you the easy ways to make these customizations so it doesn't take very long to do at all. So stick with me. Again, this is the manual process. I would find those words, I would go back to my resume, and I can edit them right here in this window, and then continue on and do that with each of the other keywords until I've included as many as I possibly can. Then I would go back and I would rescan my resume. And here you can see I made a lot of updates to my resume. The scan came out much better. I have a 92 now, which is a very high score to get, by the way, 92 on my resume scan. And you can see it says, great job, you've reached at least the 80% and increased your chances of being seen by a recruiter. That's the whole goal of this, folks, right there. You can see that of my ATS findings, I now have 7 of 7. My recruiter findings, I have 4 of 4. My skills matches, I increased. I didn't do all of them. I went from, I think, 23 to 33, but I'm still missing 10, but I still have a good score there. And I have all of the format checks. All of those are done. So this helped to increase my score, lift it up to a 92. And this would be a resume that I would then save. I'd be, very happy to submit to this particular job description with the hopes that it's going to meet the criteria, it's going to get through the ATS, and a recruiter is going to call me based on this resume. Does that make sense? Rob, was that a question? Cool. All right, good. Any questions at this point before we bring up an example and I'll show you how to do this?
So I have one question.
Please,
So
Scott.
my hunch is that JobScan would end up teaching you that you should do a cut and paste. You should redo your resume in a raw text format and do a cut and paste instead of uploading a resume in Microsoft Word. Is that true?
Well, what you're going to do, and that's a good question. What you're going to do is you're just going to copy it and you're going to paste it in. You don't have to reformat it as a text only, a rich text or any other thing. You just copy it, whether it's Word, it can be a PDF even. Just copy it out. It's only going to paste in the text because the input field is text only. So it'll remove all the formatting anyway.
Okay.
That makes sense? Cool. All right. So Thanks for the question, Scott. I appreciate that. Here you can see a shot of my resume scan history. You can see that I've scanned 157 resumes, 143 of them unique, and my maximum score prior to the one that I just did, of course, was an 86. My average improvement was 47% each time I did my resume scan. That's a huge improvement, folks. If you can improve just a little bit on your resume and improve the chances of matching or beating the ATS, that's going to dramatically improve your opportunities to get in front of a recruiter. And let me tell you what happens if you don't do that. I always skip over this part, but I'm going to take a moment and say this. Again, you're doing what I'm doing. We're all doing this because it feels good. Like, there's a job I like, I'm going to apply for it. I'm just going to take my generic resume and I'm going to submit it. The problem is, if you do that 30, 40, 50 times a day, the chances of you getting that resume, that same generic resume past the ATSs is virtually nil. It means you've wasted that entire day submitting a resume and an application that are likely to get shredded and thrown out even before a human being has seen them. I don't want you guys wasting your time here, right? And again, my job is to teach you how do we make this time very productive and help you get those high scores without wasting a lot of time rewriting your resume over and over and over. I'm going to show you that in a moment. But please understand, I don't want you wasting time. So don't sit at home submitting the same resume to job after job after job, because it is a complete waste of time. The ATSs are just going to discard your resume, and I don't want you to do that. All right. So what are we going to talk about here? Oh, I want to talk about the cost of JobScan, because while there are free tools and they have freemium versions, JobScan has a freemium version as well. There's a free version, which is you can do 2 JobScan matches per month. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have that much confidence in myself. I'm going to apply to more than 2 jobs in a month. So while the 2 is nice to try it out, I would highly recommend going with the paid version. Now, all the way over on the right-hand side, there's a monthly version if you just want to try it out for a month, and that runs about $50, right? $49.95. You get unlimited scans, you get all the stuff, everything the JobScan offers, $50 for the month. But if you're going to be searching for a job for more than a month, and statistics say that we all are, then you probably want to look at the one in the middle here. That gives you 2 free weeks, no charge, unlimited scans, all of the tools that JobScan offers, and it's completely free for 2 weeks. So if you're unsure about this tool and you just want to give it a test and see, does it really help my resume? Does it really get me, recruiters calling me back and those kind of things? Go with the middle one. Sign up, try it for 2 weeks. If you're not seeing any results, if you're not getting more callbacks, if you're not getting people inquiring on your resume, then cancel it before 2 weeks is up. It's easy to do. It's not like canceling AOL. You just go into your account, you say cancel, and it's gone. But it's a really great way to test this out. If you decide that you want to keep it, if it's working for you and you just haven't gotten the job offer yet, but you're seeing results, then it's $90, which amounts to $30 a month. And I got to tell you, if you're looking for a job, $30 a month is minimum amount to expend to help dramatically improve your chances of getting in front of a recruiter. It's highly worth it. I've used it dozens and dozens of times over my career. Signed up for account, canceled the account, signed up for the account, canceled the account. I've been a premium member for 6 months at a time, and then I cancel my account and I come back. It's easy to do, I promise you. But definitely get one of these tools, whether it's Teal or JobScan or whatever, and use them for this purpose so that you're not wasting time submitting generic resumes that get tossed out. Questions here? I'll pause before I bring up a resume and show you exactly how to do this. Any questions here? Craig, how are we doing on time?
We're fine. We got till, we go till 11:30. So 15,
All right.
17 minutes.
You still have a lot of stuff you want to cover after this? I want to try. Okay.
No,
good.
we're done. So you got all the time.
All right. So I've already talked about these. Let me click through this. And one thing to point out, if you're not familiar, the URL for JobScan is not jobscan.com, it's jobscan.co. So make sure you catch that, right? That's one of the important things. You can just Google JobScan and it'll come up to you, but just wanted you to know. All right, let's take a look at an example now. And I'm going to switch over to this guy. Craig, are you seeing my resume on the screen now? Yeah, Scott, thank you. Perfect, perfect. All right. So I'm showing you my resume. This is my actual resume. And I'm showing this to you not as an example of, hey, my resume is, no, my resume is not the best, but it is a very good, very functional resume to beat the ATS systems. And I'm going to show you some very specific reasons why. One of the first things I talked about when we started this session was headers and footers, right? Again, if you're not familiar with a header or footer, back in the Microsoft Word days, and Google Docs has the same thing, there's this section at the top of the document and the bottom of the document called the header and the footer. These are designed so that you can put something in that section, either the header or the footer, and that will appear on every page of your document without having to type it in and space and all those kind of things, right? This is the area that I was talking about, that if you put if I take my name and my contact information and I move them up into that header section so that they appear on every page, that will likely get chopped off by the ATS systems, which means, again, I might have the perfect resume, but they have no idea who I am or how to contact me. So make sure you're not putting your contact information into the header or the footer of your document. Good, good? All right, perfect, moving on. The next thing I want to talk about is that title that we mentioned earlier on. This is where I talked about where I differ slightly from what Lori said earlier, in that while she said don't change your titles on your resume, when I'm talking about don't change your titles, I'm talking about within each of the job descriptions. Like here's my Salesforce title right there. Here's my second Salesforce title. Here's my third Salesforce title. I don't change those titles, right? These were my titles of my roles that I held. However, the title of my resume up here at the top, this is something that I change just about every time I apply for a job. And I make this title match whatever the position is that I'm applying for. So if I'm applying for a director of education, this resume will be a director of education role. If I'm applying for a senior program manager of education, I'll change my title to that. You want your title of your resume to match the title of the job description, because again, that gives you a higher score on the ATS, which will give you a better likelihood of beating it and getting a recruiter to call you back. The second thing that I have here, this is I think we call them CAR statements, but this is my my overview, right? This is what we typically refer to as an overview. I will change this on occasion to match something if there's something specific in the job description, but usually this stays unchanged on my resume. I don't want to rewrite my overview statement every single time, because you have to get really creative to do that. and to be creative takes time. So I want to do this as quickly as possible. So I've got a decent overview statement that I use for myself. You should have the same. But the section down here, which is called key skills, this next section right here that I'm highlighting, that is something I change every single time I submit a resume, right? This is one of those many areas within or throughout my resume and throughout this resume format that you can change very quickly and easily to add those keywords in without having to modify your entire resume, right? So for example, as we were talking earlier about the phrase customer experience, if I didn't have enough customer experience labels or phrases in my resume, I could pull one or more of these out of this section here and replace them with the keywords that are missing from the job scan results. Does that make sense? Cool. The next section in my resume, and I'm just going to go down here and show you the sections that I use, are select accomplishments. This is a section that I do change, not often, but sometimes, again, if there's a particular want or desire or something that they called out that's unusual in the job description, if I have an accomplishment and I have a whole document that's just my accomplishments all written out, that I can copy and paste and move those accomplishments in here very easily, right? So if there's an accomplishment that aligns with a requirement, an unusual requirement in the job description, I'll just go over to my document, find one that I think more closely matches that, and I'll replace one of these two select accomplishments with one that more closely aligns with the job description. Okay, so another quick and easy way to make a customization there. Down under personal experience, I don't do a lot of customization of this section, other than each of my job descriptions has this section here called, on this resume, I think I've called them all skills. Let me just double check. Yeah, I have. I changed it. I usually call it competencies, but in this particular, for whatever reason, this particular resume, I've updated my word competencies to skills. Every job description that I have has a line called skills. And the nice thing about this is this can either be a sentence about the skills that I use to apply to that particular role, or it can be very similar to the keywords up above, just a string of keywords that apply to, or that I use to apply to that particular role. Another place that I can quickly and easily update if I needed to, again, apply customer experience or any other keywords that aren't in my resume sufficiently. Rob, it looked like you either had a light bulb or a comment, so I want to come to you. Was that an epiphany or just a curiosity?
I thought it's a nice way to break up your resume with the skills. That's a nice format, and I'm kind of curious about the overall format because you do tend to have a lot of text that just gets the point across, and it seems like a really good resume from what I see. So I like it.
Thank you for that. And I'll post this so you guys can steal my format. I have no problem with that. This is, as I said before, my resume is not perfect, but it is a really good resume and a good format for writing a resume if you're going to be submitting them online, because there are no columns here. The text is bunched together appropriately. There are certain callouts. You'll notice that I have certain things bolded because when recruiters and hiring managers skim my resume, there's certain key phrases and words that I want them to see. So I bold those and I call them out, right? So that's another approach that you can use, is bolding and highlighting key aspects of your resume. So again, as I go through each of these job descriptions, you'll notice that I have the skills section, which is another area where I can add or augment or very quickly change those keywords out to add in the ones that JobScan is telling me are important for each of those roles. Another thing that I want to point out is, you'll notice I was talking about white space and not making your resume too compact, like too dense with words. You can see that each of my job descriptions, I've got a lot of white space around it, right? It kind of chunks that information about that particular role, gives it a little white space so people can see, oh, that's all the information about that role and so on. So again, it's visually appealing. Even though this is a resume that's for an ATS, I can use this both for handing it or emailing it to a recruiter or hiring manager, or I can use it to submit online through an ATS. And I'm going to scroll down here a little bit more. Sorry for all the scrolling. This is my 4-page resume. I don't recommend 4 pages, so I just want to let you know that. But this was for a particular role, and I needed to reference a role that was way back in my early job history. And that's why this resume is a little longer. I asked the recruiter and hiring manager if it would be okay if I submitted a 4-page resume before I did. And they said, absolutely. They wanted to see that reference to that experience. So as I scroll all the way down to the bottom of my resume, a couple of other things I want to point out. And I scrolled past this, and I don't want to scroll back up because I don't want to make you all dizzy with scrolling up and down. But one other thing that's important for the ATS are the headings of your sections. You notice at the top, mine says work experience, I believe, right? That was the title of that section above. Here you can see I've got education and certifications. I've got volunteering and community service. You want to keep your titles of these sections in your resume fairly generic. For example, I've seen some people use stuff I've done as the heading for their work experience, right? Well, that's clever, it's cute, it's different. But the problem is when you submit that into an online ATS doesn't read stuff I've done as a heading for your professional experience, right? So you want to keep those headings fairly common because that's what the ATS systems are looking for. If it can't read your resume, if it gets confused by your resume, the chances are much higher that it's going to toss your resume out and move on to the next one. Your goal with using these tools is to make the ATS love you and pass you on to the recruiter and the hiring manager. Does that make sense? Okay, so I know I'm beating this horse to death, but really that's the whole purpose. Because I know you, because I know me, we're all going to spend time online applying for jobs because that's what we do, right? When we're not doing something else, we're applying for jobs online. We're gonna do this. So if you're gonna spend time doing this painful job search activity at home alone by yourself, applying for jobs online, you might as well get the best bang for your buck to try and make that, and the best ROI, to try and make that recruiter love your resume and the ATS love your resume. These tips that I've shared with you today are tips that have been successful for hundreds and hundreds of people that I've worked with, and they can be successful for you as well. Was there one more thing I wanted to point out down here at the bottom? Oh yes, make sure, this is another simple thing. This is not a job scan thing, but this is another simple thing, and that is make sure that your name and email address, contact information are on every page of your resume. I can't tell you as a 25-year hiring manager how many times I've found a really good candidate, but their cover page or their first page of the resume got separated from the other pages. I really liked the page 2, 3, and 4, perhaps, but I didn't have page 1. I didn't know who they were. So make sure you have your contact information on every page, but again, not in the header or the footer. Put it in the body of your resume. Okay, I'm going to stop here because now it is time to go back over for questions. Oh yeah, a couple of other quick things. JobScan now has a bounce back toolkit. So if you're thinking of making a career change, go check out their bounce back toolkit. It's fantastic. Lots of great tools for resumes, career change, LinkedIn tools, and job search. It's brand new and it has a library of all kinds of self-paced consumable assets and videos that you can watch, kind of like listening to me for an hour, but even better. So check that out. The bounce back toolkit's really good. And then for tracking your jobs, I know you all have probably a spreadsheet or something you're using to track your jobs. I want to tell you that the JobScan job tracker is free. It's probably the single best tool that I've ever used to track jobs, because if you're an agile person, it works like a Kanban board. It has jobs I'm interested in that I've saved, jobs I've applied to, which ties in the exact JobScan resume that you applied for. So you don't have to keep track of where that resume went that you applied to that job for. It has a place for notes. You can move jobs across as you have different interviews, and then you can archive and retire them. They'll stay in there forever. So if you're looking for a job again down the road, you can come back to your JobScan job tracker and you can see all the people that you contacted before. It's just a really, really good, easy to use tool, and I highly recommend it. So check that out. Last but not least, the bottom line of this whole presentation, I'm just going to put these all on the screen and run through them quickly. Do I have to customize every resume for every job description? The answer is yes, you do have to customize every job for every job description. Scan every resume using JobScan to view the ATS match. Use the suggestions to improve. Aim for a match between or greater than 75 before you submit. If you're having problems with that, I'm going to give you my contact information here in a minute. You can reach out to me, but there are techniques to do that. Name each resume accordingly. That's another one. I just want to say, kind of like putting your name on the bottom of every page. Name your resume appropriately. I can't tell you how many resumes have been submitted to me as a hiring manager with silly ass names. Sexy Legs 429 resume 12. But no, give your resume a very simple name. Your name, the resume name, the job, and maybe the date that you submitted it, so that it makes it easier for you to find as well, right? Don't embarrass yourself. And then track your resume submissions, as I said, using the JobScan job tracker, because it's a great tool. We already talked about it being jobscan.co, and whew, we made it finally. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for holding on so tightly and making it all the way to the end of this very fast ride. You've kept your hands and arms inside the ride at all times. I do appreciate that as a former Disneyland cast member. So now I'm going to stop talking, open the floor to you all to ask any questions that you have that remain, and then I'll share a little bit about the 10% club. Ready? Go.
I have a quick question. So I understand what you're saying about changing the job title to match the requested job title. Okay, so I'm a senior technical writer. My question is, a lot of jobs out there just say technical writer, and then I stick in that I'm a senior technical writer.
Yes,
Should
ma'am.
I be matching technical writer precisely to technical writer? Or, I mean, am I throwing myself out accidentally by saying senior technical writer?
Gabrielle, that's a great question, and I would leave senior in. What it's looking for is the phrase technical writer. So
Good.
you have that in there, and you've added an additional word, which is fine. What it's looking for are missing words. So if you just put senior writer, well, that's probably going to be an issue, right? The ATS
Right.
might, no, you're not technical, and it throws you out. But if you have the words that are at the top of the job description in your resume as the title, even if you've added senior, that's going to be just fine.
Good. Okay, because I really like sticking. I mean, I've got over 20 years experience, and yeah, and when it says technical writer, so then I wonder sometimes if it actually knocks, I mean, I get knocked out because they're worried about money. But yeah, that's and then on a related subject. Okay, so I am a senior technical writer, but I'm also an API technical writer. So would that clutter up the title of the file if I had senior technical writer, like hyphen API technical writer? Because usually I put one or the other.
Again, it's looking for the words, and as long as you're not missing the words, that's fine. What I would do is put a vertical bar. So senior technical writer and then API writer on the other side of the bar, for example. That's fine. I do that too because I have lots of different areas of specialty. And sometimes I might have two bars in my title, depending on what they're looking for. As long as it's in the same vein, right?
Yeah.
That's the important thing. If you were, again, if you were looking for a writing job, like, to be a journalist, you want to make sure that you've got all the words in there that kind of describe and delineate which area you're looking for. So as long as you do that, you're good. Good question.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for asking that. Any other questions here?
Hi, Colin. This is Daniel. I know you showed a 4-page resume and you said you were commissioned. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because I've always tried to keep it to 2-page max, and I just didn't know if that seems like in the digital age that really doesn't matter much anymore. Okay, that's the answer.
Totally. Yes, I can do that. So here's the thing, Daniel. Don't take this the wrong way, but I'm an older person in my career, so I have probably a few more jobs and a few more job descriptions than you may have to date. That's all I'm saying. Is that fair? Okay. So if I'm applying for a job that would benefit from me drawing upon some of those jobs further back in my career to be relevant. For example, I spent 10 years in sales at the beginning of my career and the last 25 in technical education, for example. If I need folks to see that I had, I'm going to lose my video again, but that's okay. I'll turn it off. If I need folks to see that I have relevant sales experience, I may go back and truncate things so I can try and get it on 3 pages to be able to show some of that previous experience way back. There's no right way or wrong way to do this, honestly. As I said before, opinions about resumes are like elbows. And again, I just turned off my camera so you can't see me do this, but they're like elbows, right? Everybody's got them. And it's really just going to depend on the company you're applying for, the type of job that you're looking at, and where your experience lies in your resume. Ideally, you want to keep it as short as possible. 2 pages is the optimal, right? 3 pages is still acceptable. And I'm working with hundreds of recruiters right now in my Slack layoff community, and they all say the same thing. 3 pages is more than acceptable. If you are an older worker, you've had lots of jobs and you've been in industry for a while, like me, 40 years. God, I can't believe I said that again. You're going to have a long resume. And if there's relevant experience back, then you can go back and include that. Ideally, most of the recruiters are saying for those of us who do have long work histories, you probably only need at this point to go back about 10 years. That's the limit right? Go back about 10 years. As long as you can show you have 10 years of experience, those are the most relevant, those last 10 years. But again, if you have something in your further back past that you want to bring forward, then it just depends. For an ATS, I would try to keep it no more than 3 pages. That's the generally accepted amount for an ATS. If it's 5, 6, 7 pages, yeah, you're probably going to get kicked out. It's just too long.
Thank you.
Daniel, great question. I wish I had a more concrete answer. It's like, what's the best way to find a job? There's no formula for that. And I still tell people the best way to find a job is however you find a job. The greater the odds are going to be with referrals, as we talked about earlier, the lesser return on the investment is going to be the blind applying for jobs online. But again, we just spent an hour talking about how you can improve your chances in that area as well. So however you find a job is the best way to do it. And if I could be of any assistance, please let me know. Other questions here before we come to time?
Hi, Colin. My name's DeFonza McElwain. I have a question. So as far as like when you actually go and submit your application online, so I spent all this time getting my resume through JobScan to get that ATS high score. Now I go to the website to actually submit my application. And
Yes.
it's asking me to then go back and manually, I don't know if I should manually go back and relist all my job history, which is also my resume, or not. And I struggle with that. It's like I spent all this time with JobScan. Now I'm having to do this all over again. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, DeFonza, first of all, let me say how happy I am to see you here. You may not remember this, but I was the guy who signed you into a JSN your very first time, your very first meeting. I remember meeting you when you came. So nice.
That is true. I remember now.
All right, there you go. And so here's the thing. This is one of the biggest beefs in the entire HR recruiting talent management industry. Why do I have to fill out each job description separately in your ATS if I've already uploaded my damn resume? The answer to your question is, unfortunately, yes, you do need to do it both ways. Now, here's the good news, though. If you've done the right thing with your job scan and you've got the resume looking just how you want, just copy and paste it into the sections and do exactly what your resume shows. Put that exactly into the ATS. They require it because right now things are disconnected. HRIS systems are not intelligent yet. I give it another year or so as AI kicks in and they can actually parse things out and do it correctly. We won't have to do this, but today we're still struggling with, please upload your resume. Now take everything that you just said and let's enter it again manually, one line at a time. It's stupid, it's painful, but the unfortunate answer to your question is yes, I would do that because remember, what's the point of this whole exercise? To get you a job. Why would you not jump over every hurdle that you can in order to show that you're willing to do it to get the job, right? It's unfortunate, but that's the truth. Sorry for that answer, but there it is.
Thank you. Thank you.
It stinks. I have other words, but we'll go with stinks. I see Shelley nodding to that. Yes, exactly. Guys, I appreciate your time today. This has been great. I'm available for any other questions that you have. I can stick here for a few more minutes if you need, or you can reach out to me directly. I'm going to put one last thing on the screen here, and that is the 10% Club. So when we started this Salesforce layoff Slack back in January, we originally did so to help our H-1 visa customers, our employees, because they only have 60 days before the visa expires and they have to go home. So we spun it up originally for them, but then we expanded it to all the Salesforce people. And then Microsoft happened, and then Amazon happened, and then Google happened, and. So we've now expanded this to help support the entire tech community. So if you're looking for a technical role or role within a technical company, I invite you, scan the QR code on the screen that you see here. I'll paste the link into the chat here in just a second. I definitely invite you to come join our community and get connected with recruiters and hiring managers. Let people know how we can help you, and also participate in any of our coaching or workshops or any other things that we provide, in addition to, not to replace JSN, because Craig and Becky do a phenomenal job. They have terrific resources. I want to give you an alternate path to be able to, where's the chat window? There it is. I want to give you an alternate path to be able to find additional leverage and traction in your job search. There's the bit.ly link. You can grab that and you can go to our Slack workspace and register and log in. When you do, DM me just so I know that you came in, and I'll make sure to say hello and get you oriented to the space. We just wanted all the JSN team, myself included, we just want to help get you guys back to work and back on your feet as quickly as possible. If there's anything any of us could do, I think we've made it abundantly clear that we're to help. We're here to help. So just reach out and let us know. And that officially brings me to my final slide. There you go. Thank you, everyone. It's been my pleasure. Craig, thanks for having me in. I do appreciate it. You guys reach out to me if there's anything I can do. Thank you, Scott, for that. And Craig, any final words, thoughts here before I hand it back over to you and turn this off?
No, this has been awesome and very much needed, very practical. You know, that is kind of one of the top questions we've had over the years is how do I get more interviews?
Right.
And you have nailed that for everybody. And you know, even if they do the 2 weeks and learn how to do it on your own, you afford, man, you can learn so much in those 2 weeks from JobScan. And then you also brought up, you know, kind of some, what are blind spots, I guess. I had an engineer take your advice, Colin, and start using JobScan, and he realized that he was heavy on hard skills and light on soft skills.
Exactly.
In today's market, they are looking for soft skills to a much bigger degree. And so we can't, you know, we tend to go left brain, right brain, and, you know, we're either that hard skill orientated or we're the soft skill orientation. And it's, you know, those type things we can learn from tools like this. And
Agreed.
so, yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm just beginning to check out Teal myself. So I don't have an opinion on Teal. It looks cool. It's a newer company, a newer tool out there than JobScan. But as I've gone through it, pretty much everything that they have, you can also do in JobScan. So I guess it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. The pricing model is almost identical. I don't know if Teal offers the free 2 weeks. So that changes, by the way. So just check those out. But whatever you do, use one of these matching tools, folks. There's no reason to waste your time applying for jobs online when that application is not going to go any further than your submit button. I mean, really, why would you do that?
Yeah.
So please do that. Craig has my contact information. So if anybody needs to reach out to me, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn also. I teach a LinkedIn optimization class and a number of other things. And Craig, I've just so you know, I've just relaunched SWAT teams. And we're doing SWAT teams in our community. In fact, I'm kicking those off today. So I have a session that I teach on that also. So if you want me to do that sometime in the future, just let me know.